this video, I'll be going over some of the members of the 27 Club, as well as a few celebrities that aren't a part of the club but still died very young. And simply put, for anyone that doesn't know what the 27 Club is, the 27 Club is the name given to rock stars who died at the age of 27, and usually drug and alcohol abuse is a part of it. Living fast and dying young has long been a part of rock and roll, and the first years of success are often the most dangerous. And this is with both British and American musicians. And they're 3 times more likely to die than the average person during that time. The term became widely known after Kurt Cobain died in 1994, and his mother said, "Now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club." There's not a lot known about Robert Johnson's life, but we do know that he was one of 11 children, and when he was growing up, he was fascinated by music. He may have seen it as a way out of his hard life in Mississippi during the Great Depression. His mother was married, but she conceived him with a farm worker named Noah Johnson, and Robert never got to meet his father. And have you ever heard of the legend of Robert Johnson and the devil at the crossroads? If not, according to the legend, he made a Faustian pact, which is when someone trades in their soul for personal gain. So one night, the legend goes, in late 1930, he walked down a dirt road near Dockery Farms, a cotton plantation. He took his guitar to the intersection of Highways 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, to ask the devil to fine-tune it and give him extraordinary talent. Of course, there were some strings attached, so the devil asked Robert for something in return, his everlasting soul. And after the alleged meeting, Robert quickly rose to fame, and he was constantly traveling to perform. And it's said that for every town he performed in, there was at least one woman waiting on him at night. His style was multifaceted and hard to pin down. When Eric Clapton heard Robert's music, he said that it sounded like 2 guitars were playing, and he was wondering who the other player was, but it was just Robert, by himself. And Eric Clapton considers him the most important blues musician who ever lived. The legend says that he died on all 4s, barking like a dog, as the devil began to collect his debt. And if you watch the show Supernatural, you may remember the episode Crossroad Blues, and there's a character playing Robert Johnson that makes an appearance in that episode. And towards the end of his short life, he had an affair with the wife of a juke joint owner, and he knew about the affair. He offered Robert a gig one night and gave him something to drink to lubricate his vocal cords during his performance. But Robert noticed that it had a really bad aftertaste, and it turns out the husband had dissolved some mothballs in his drink. So he kept playing even though he felt awful. But later in the evening, he got worse and he became violently ill, and he had to be dragged to his room by another musician. The husband didn't mean to kill Robert, he just wanted to teach him a lesson. But Robert had been, unbeknownst to that guy, had been diagnosed with a stomach ulcer the month before. So the mothballs irritated it, and it caused a hemorrhage, and he eventually bled to death. So in his final hours, he was convulsing and coughing out blood, and he died after 3 days of agony and excruciating pain. With his mysterious death at the age of 27, on top of his song titles and lyrics, the legend of his meeting with the devil has only grown. And some of his song titles were Crossroad Blues, Me and the Devil Blues, and Hellhound on My Trail. Jimi Hendrix was born Johnny Allen Hendrix on November 27th in 1942 in Seattle, Washington. And his father later changed his name to James Marshall. Jimi had a difficult childhood, and he sometimes lived with relatives or acquaintances. His mother, Lucille, was only 17 when he was born, and his parents would drink and fight a lot, so she eventually left the family after they had 2 more children together. He and his brother would hide in the cupboard while their parents fought, and Jimi would only see her a few times before she died from a ruptured spleen in 1958, and she was only 32. Jimi was a fan of blues and rock and roll, and music became a sanctuary for him. His father never really showed him any affection and would hit him with belts because he was left-handed. His father, however, encouraged his musical aspirations, and Jimi taught himself to play guitar. And like so many young men, he just wanted his father's approval. So in 1961, he followed in his father's footsteps and joined the army. And he also formed a band called the King Casuals. And he served until 1962 when he was honorably discharged after he got hurt during a parachute jump. And he was now performing under the name Jimmy James as a session musician. And he played backup for Little Richard, B.B. King, Sam Cooke, and the Isley Brothers. One of his most memorable performances was at Woodstock in 1969, where he performed the Star-Spangled Banner. And it's obvious that this man had a very rare gift. Jimi was excited to tell his father about his band, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, but his father wasn't interested. And this is one of the last pictures of Jimi, and it was taken at the Samarkand Hotel on September 17, 1970, and he died a day later. On September 18th, Jimi choked on his own vomit and died of asphyxia. He had taken 9 Vesperac sleeping pills, 18 times the recommended dosage. And some of Jimi's most popular quotes are, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Music is a safe kind of high, and blues is easy to play, but hard to feel." She was born in Port Arthur, Texas in 1943, and growing up, she was a self-described misfit. In high school, she was overweight with acne, and she was called pig, freak, and end lover because she didn't hate black people like her peers did. She became friends with a group of other misfits, and one of whom had albums by black blues artists, and this is when she discovered that she had a talent to sing the blues. In 1966, her vocal style caught the attention of a psychedelic rock band called Big Brother and the Holding Company. She became their singer, and the group soon signed a deal, and their debut album released in August of 1967. Their second album topped the charts, and Janis became a star. With success, of course, came a crazy work schedule, and by 1969, she was allegedly shooting at least $200 worth of heroin every single day. Her last recordings were on October the 1st, 1970, and this is when she recorded Mercedes-Benz and also a birthday greeting for John Lennon. His birthday was on October the 9th, but he didn't receive the greeting until after she died. On October the 4th, Janis failed to show up at Sunset Sound Studios, and she'd been late before, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But when her road manager went to check on her, the drapes were drawn, and she didn't answer her door when he knocked, banged, and even yelled. So because of that, he spoke to the manager, who agreed that they should go into the room and check on her. There they found her wedged between the bed and a nightstand, and she was wearing her nightgown. Her lips were bloody when they turned her over, and her nose was broken. She died of a heroin overdose at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood. There weren't any drugs in the room, just alcohol, but a friend of hers had removed the drugs and later put them back once they realized an autopsy would prove that she did have drugs in her system. A road manager believed that she was given heroin that was much more potent than what she had received in the past, and several of her dealer's customers also overdosed that same weekend. And Janis was cremated, and her ashes were scattered from a plane into the Pacific Ocean, and she left $2,500 in her will to throw a party for when she passed away. And less than a year after her death, her last album, Pearl, was released, and it went straight to the top of the Billboard charts. Janis Joplin was a true icon. Amy Winehouse grew up in Southgate in North London. Her father was named Mitch, and he was a cab driver, and her mother Janis was a pharmacist. They were married in their early 20s, but they separated when Amy was 9. She and her older brother Alex mostly lived with their mother, but Amy considered herself a daddy's girl, and she even had a tattoo on her arm that said so. When she was 10, she formed a salt and pepper inspired rap duo called Sweet and Sour with her best friend. Once she was signed to a label, and after a six-figure advance, she purchased her first apartment in London's Camden neighborhood, and she was 22 at the time. And there she became a regular at its pubs, and that's where she met her future husband, Blake. He was an addict, and he became the center of her world and her most dangerous addiction. Spending time with Blake came first, and performing came second. And their previous breakups devastated Amy, and he was the inspiration for Back to Black's darkest and saddest songs. And at the time of its release, the album was the highest charting US debut ever by a British female, and that title now belongs to Adele. She and Blake would eventually rekindle their relationship, but a year later, he was sentenced to 27 months in jail for assault and battery charges. While her personal life was going downhill, her career continued to flourish. Her first manager, Nick Godwin, said that Amy changed overnight after she met Blake, and that she just sounded completely different. He introduced her to heroin and changed her life for the worst. Her personality became more distant. When he met her, she smoked weed, but she thought people who took Class A drugs like heroin and LSD were stupid, and she mocked them. Her TV appearances were becoming more and more erratic, and her US tour had to be canceled due to exhaustion. In October 2007, she and Blake were arrested in Norway for marijuana possession. In December, she was photographed wandering around Camden in just her bra and jeans, and she looked emaciated. Soon after, in January 2008, footage of her smoking crack showed up in the English tabloid, The Sun, and the tabloids couldn't get enough of her erratic behavior, her relationship problems, and her stints in rehab. She was so drunk that she was booed off stages around the world and canceled more concerts than she played. She even left the stage in the middle of a performance in St. Lucia in early 2009 because she couldn't remember the lyrics. According to her father, Amy had also developed early symptoms of emphysema from smoking crack cocaine and chain-smoking cigarettes. She checked into rehab in the spring of 2011, hoping to make a comeback, but her final performance in Serbia was a disaster. And around 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, a member of Amy's security detail stopped by to check on her, and by the time another guard saw her around 4:05, her body was cold and stiff with rigor mortis. The coroner said that she died of accidental alcohol poisoning, and her blood alcohol level was 0.416, more than 5 times the legal limit. Amy Winehouse was so much more than someone that was addicted to drugs. Her voice sounded like it came from another time in history, and it was truly unique. She really made you feel something, and I've been a fan of hers ever since her first album. Aaliyah was born January the 16th, 1979 in Brooklyn, and she was raised in Detroit. We were born the same year, and I had all 3 of her albums, and it's very, very unfortunate that her career ended so quickly. When she was 10, she was on Star Search, and she also had the opportunity to perform in concert with Gladys Knight. At the age of 12, she signed with Jive Records, and R. Kelly became her so-called mentor and was the lead songwriter and producer of her first album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. It sold 3 million copies in the US and was certified double platinum. Aaliyah was now known as the Princess of R&B. She was 15 when she married R. Kelly, but on the marriage certificate she was listed as being 18. But the marriage was illegal, so it was annulled by her parents. On October the 25th, 2001, at 6:50 p.m., she and members of the record company had wrapped up shooting the Rock the Boat video in the Bahamas, and they were ready to get back home to the United States. They had a flight that was scheduled for the next day, but they were ready to leave. And that particular airplane was smaller than the one they had originally. And unfortunately, after takeoff, the plane crashed and it caught fire about 200 feet from the end of the runway. A charter pilot named Louis Key said that he overheard some of the passengers arguing with the pilot before taking off. From the crash, Aaliyah suffered from severe burns and a blow to her head, in addition to severe shock and a weak heart. The coroner said that she went into such a state of shock and that if she had survived the crash, her recovery would have been nearly impossible given the severity of her injuries. The bodies were taken to the morgue at Princess Margaret Hospital in Nassau, where they were kept for relatives to help identify them, and some of the bodies were badly burned in the crash. An investigation determined that the plane was overloaded by several hundred pounds when it attempted to take off, and it was also carrying one more passenger that it was certified for, including Aaliyah's 300-pound bodyguard. The NTSB reported that the airplane was seen lifting off the runway, and then it did a nosedive, and then it crashed in a marsh on the south side of the departure end of runway 27. The pilot was later found to have traces of cocaine and alcohol in his body, and he wasn't qualified to fly the aircraft that was designated for that flight. Aaliyah's family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the aircraft's operator. On August 21st, 2019, the Madame Tussauds Museum revealed a wax figure of Aaliyah at their Las Vegas location. Aaliyah was an anxious flyer, and allegedly she was worried about boarding the plane once she learned that it was overloaded. She grew even more anxious when they got to the airport and she saw the small plane. And recently, a new book on her life stated that Aaliyah didn't even want to board the plane and that she was given a sleeping pill and carried on to the plane asleep. Christina Grimmie started posting videos on YouTube in 2009, and on June 10th, 2016, she was fatally shot while she was signing autographs following a concert performance in Orlando, Florida. The man that killed her was obsessed with her, and he worked at Best Buy. He was on the Geek Squad, and he had gotten hair transplants. He had LASIK eye surgery. He became vegan so that he lost weight, and according to his colleagues at work, they said that his goal was to become too hot for her to resist. He would listen to her music at work, and he said that she was going to someday be his wife. And although her death was national news, the Pulse nightclub shooting also happened that same weekend, so it kind of overshadowed the news of her death. So while she was signing autographs, that's when he pulled out a gun and shot her. Her brother Mark tried to tackle the guy, but the shooter then took his own life. And Adam Levine was her mentor on The Voice. She placed third on The Voice, and he paid for her funeral. And her mother passed away from breast cancer 2 years after Christina died. And there's a 5-part podcast series on her life and her death, and it's called Christina Grimmie, The Murder of a Rising Star. And it's very detailed. I'll put the link to the podcast in the description.